72 hours. That is the exact window between a major disruption and completely empty store shelves. And most people will spend that time realizing they have almost nothing. Think about what is sitting in your kitchen right now. Not what you plan to buy, not what you meant to stock up on. What is actually there today, ready to use without power, without refrigeration, without a trip to the store? For most people, the honest answer is uncomfortable. A few cans, some pasta, maybe a box of cereal that expires next month. That is not preparation. That is a delay. What actually keeps people functioning through extended crises is not the amount of food they have. It is the type. Shelf life measured in decades, not weeks. Nutrition dense enough to maintain the body under stress. Simple enough to prepare when resources are limited. And there is one item on this list, you will know it when we get there, that most people overlook entirely, even though skipping it can make everything else feel pointless. Here are 12 powdered foods that belong in every serious long-term preparation plan. Stay through the full list. Some of these will surprise you. 12. Powdered eggs. Fresh eggs feel permanent until they are not. They vanish within days of any supply chain disruption, and without refrigeration, they are gone even faster. The moment power becomes unreliable, fresh eggs become a memory. But in powdered form, eggs tell a completely different story. Properly stored powdered eggs last anywhere from 15 to 30 years. No refrigeration required. No supply chain dependency. They sit quietly in your storage and wait. And when you need them, they deliver something that many other shelf-stable foods cannot. Complete protein with every essential amino acid your body requires to maintain muscle, support recovery, and keep functioning under stress. Here is what most people do not understand about protein deficiency. It does not feel like starvation. It feels like fatigue that gets slightly worse every day. Tasks that used to feel easy start requiring real effort. Recovery after physical activity slows down. You are still eating, but something inside is gradually declining. That decline starts earlier than most people expect, often within 2 to 3 weeks of inadequate protein intake. Powdered eggs stop that process. Mix the powder with warm water, let it hydrate for a few minutes, then cook it exactly like fresh eggs. Scrambled, fried, baked into other dishes. The flexibility is real. But here is where people lose years of shelf life without knowing it. Storage matters as much as purchase. Moisture and oxygen are the two enemies. Keep powdered eggs sealed in a mylar bag with oxygen absorbers, stored in a cool, dark location, and divide them into smaller portions so you are not exposing the entire supply each time you open a container. Label every package with the storage date. This one habit alone can extend usable life by years. When fresh protein sources disappear, powdered eggs are not a backup option. They become the primary defense against physical breakdown. 11. Powdered milk. The modern food system treats fresh milk as if it will always be available. It will not. Electricity goes out, transportation halts, and within days the dairy aisle is gone. What remains for people who planned ahead is powdered milk. And it changes the entire nutritional picture. Stored correctly, powdered milk lasts over 20 years. But the reason to include it goes beyond shelf life. Calcium and protein work together in the body to maintain bone density, support the nervous system, and enable recovery. When both disappear from the diet, the effects are not dramatic at first. Fatigue increases gradually. Minor aches take longer to resolve. Physical capacity quietly decreases. You are functional, but operating at a lower level than before, and the gap widens over time. Powdered milk is flexible enough to use across multiple meal types, mixed into drinks, added to soups, used in baking, or stirred into other dishes to increase nutritional value without changing the base flavor significantly. One important distinction worth knowing: skim milk powder stores longer than whole milk powder because it contains less fat, and fat degrades faster over time. For long-term storage, skim is the better choice. Temperature, humidity, light, and oxygen are the four variables that determine how long powdered milk stays viable. Control all four, and you protect decades of nutritional value. Divide into portions, use mylar bags with oxygen absorbers, and store in a consistently cool and dark location. Opening smaller portions instead of one large container keeps the rest protected. When fresh dairy is unavailable for weeks, powdered milk is the difference between a diet that maintains the body and one that slowly dismantles it. 10. Whey protein. People preparing for disruptions tend to stock carbohydrates. Rice, flour, pasta, crackers. These are the items that fill most storage shelves. And carbohydrates matter. But they cannot do what protein does, and the absence of protein does not announce itself loudly. In the first several days, the body compensates. Muscle tissue begins breaking down gradually to supply the amino acids the body needs to maintain essential functions. You do not feel it immediately. But after 2 to 3 weeks of insufficient protein intake, the change becomes noticeable. Strength decreases. Recovery after any physical effort takes significantly longer. Tasks that once felt automatic now require conscious effort. The body is consuming itself to stay operational, and that process has a limited timeline. Whey protein in powdered form stores for 10 to 15 years under proper conditions. Its real advantage is nutritional density. A single serving delivers complete protein, all essential amino acids, in a lightweight, easy-to-use format that requires no cooking. Mix it with water, stir it into oatmeal, add it to soup. It integrates into almost any meal without requiring additional preparation resources. The weakness to plan around is sensitivity to moisture and air. Frequent opening degrades quality faster than people expect. The protein begins clumping, the smell changes, and nutritional value decreases before there are obvious visual signs. Store whey in a dry, cool location away from light, seal it tightly after every use, and divide large quantities into smaller containers. Each time you open a container unnecessarily, you are shortening the effective life of everything inside. When the body starts weakening from within, whey protein is what slows that process. It does not replace a full diet, but it fills the most critical gap in most emergency food supplies. 9. Potato powder. Cooking in a crisis sounds straightforward until you realize that cooking costs resources. Every meal prepared over a fire or a camp stove uses fuel that cannot be replaced easily. Long cooking foods like dried beans or whole grains require sustained heat, which means sustained fuel consumption. Over days and weeks, this becomes a serious problem. Potato powder eliminates most of that burden. Because moisture has been removed almost entirely during processing, it stores for 20 to 30 years without refrigeration. It contains very little fat, which means it does not go rancid over time the way many other stored foods do. And it converts into a usable meal with nothing more than hot water. Sometimes even warm water is sufficient. On days when energy levels are low and cooking feels like too much, potato powder delivers carbohydrate energy quickly, with minimal preparation and minimal fuel use. It is easy to digest, which matters when the body is already under stress. A stressed digestive system does not process heavy, complex foods efficiently. Potato powder works with the body rather than against it. Storage requirements follow the same principles as other powdered foods. Moisture is the primary threat. Even small amounts of water vapor entering the packaging will cause clumping and quality degradation over time. Mylar bags with oxygen absorbers, kept in a cool and dark location, with the supply divided into manageable portions, will maintain quality for decades. Open only what you need and reseal immediately. When fuel is scarce and energy is low, potato powder turns a difficult situation into a manageable one. It is not the most exciting food on this list, but in a real extended disruption, exciting is not the goal. Functional is. 8. Oat powder. There is a less obvious connection between digestive health and overall resilience that most emergency food guides skip entirely. Approximately 70% of immune function is linked directly to the digestive system. When digestion becomes inefficient, which happens during stress and when diet changes significantly, the body's ability to absorb nutrients from everything else you eat decreases. You can have a well-stocked supply of protein, calories, and micronutrients, and still experience physical decline, because a compromised digestive system cannot extract full value from what you are eating. Oat powder addresses this directly. Its fiber content supports steady digestion, reduces the gut stress that comes from a suddenly changed diet, and helps maintain the nutrient absorption rate that the rest of your food supply depends on. Beyond digestion, oats provide sustained energy without the sharp rise and fall that simpler carbohydrates cause. This matters during physically or mentally demanding days when stable energy is more valuable than a quick spike. Prepared with just hot water, oat powder becomes a filling, fast, low-resource meal. Combined with powdered milk or whey protein, it becomes a nutritionally complete option that requires almost no preparation time or fuel. Stored properly in a sealed, dry environment away from light, oat powder lasts 10 to 20 years. Moisture remains the variable to control. Portioning into smaller containers and limiting how often any single container is opened maintains quality far longer than storing everything in one large package. When the digestive system is under stress, everything you eat becomes less effective. Oat powder is what keeps that system working, which in turn keeps everything else on this list working the way it should. 7. Powdered butter. This is the item most people skip. And skipping it is a mistake that takes weeks to feel, which means by the time you notice it, the damage is already compounding. The body does not run on protein and carbohydrates alone. Fat is what provides deep, sustained energy, the kind that maintains body temperature, supports hormone function, and keeps internal systems operating through extended physical and mental stress. When fat intake drops significantly, the first signs are subtle. A slight increase in how cold you feel, energy that depletes faster than expected, a fatigue that sleep does not fully resolve. These are not signs of dramatic crisis. They are the early signals of a body quietly losing its ability to maintain itself. Most emergency food supplies are built around grains and protein. Fat is the missing piece, and without it, the body begins compensating in ways that are difficult to reverse once they have progressed. Powdered butter fills that gap. In dry form, it stores for 20 to 30 years without refrigeration, requires no complex storage conditions beyond a sealed, cool, dark environment, and adds caloric density and satiety to almost any meal it is added to. A small amount stirred into porridge, soup, or any cooked dish makes a meaningful difference in how filling that meal feels and how long the energy from it lasts. This is not about comfort. It is about the body having what it needs to sustain function at a physiological level. Because it contains fat, powdered butter is more sensitive to temperature and oxygen exposure than other items on this list. Storing it in small, sealed portions, away from light and heat, and opening only what is needed at one time, will preserve quality across its full potential shelf life. This is one item where disciplined storage practices make a substantial difference. 6. Powdered cheese. There is a form of deterioration that has nothing to do with calories, protein, or vitamins. It is the point where a person opens their food, understands that they need to eat, and simply does not want to. Not because they are full, not because they have better options, because every meal for the past 2 weeks has tasted the same, and the body has quietly started resisting the routine. When appetite drops in a crisis, everything else begins to unravel. The body still needs fuel, but if you are eating less than it requires, all the stored nutrition in the world cannot compensate. Physical decline accelerates, mental clarity decreases, the will to maintain normal routines weakens. And none of this happens because food ran out. It happens because food became unbearable. Powdered cheese does not prevent starvation. What it does is make meals livable enough that you keep eating them. A small amount added to potato powder, stirred into soup, or mixed into a grain dish completely transforms how that meal registers. Richer, more familiar, easier to accept. The body eats more without the mind having to override its own reluctance. That is a meaningful advantage in an extended disruption. Beyond flavor, powdered cheese adds fat and increases caloric density without adding significant volume. It provides practical nutritional value alongside its psychological function. Stored in a sealed, dry environment and divided into small portions to limit air exposure, it maintains quality over an extended period. Heat and moisture are the primary threats. Keep it away from both. When appetite fails, preparation becomes irrelevant. Powdered cheese is what keeps the system running. 5. Powdered peanut butter. Appetite collapse is the silent failure mode of most emergency food plans. People store enough food and then gradually eat less of it, not because they cannot, but because repetition kills the willingness to eat. Powdered peanut butter is one of the most effective tools against this, and it has the additional advantage of delivering both protein and caloric energy in a single lightweight product. A small amount mixed into oatmeal, stirred into a grain dish, or added to any plain food changes the flavor profile in a way that makes the meal significantly easier to eat. It does not require much. A few grams makes a noticeable difference in how the meal is received. And when a person is eating enough calories consistently, their physical and mental capacity holds at a higher level than someone who is technically eating but not eating enough. Powdered peanut butter in reduced oil form stores for 15 to 20 years under proper conditions. The reduced oil content makes it more stable than traditional peanut butter, but moisture sensitivity remains a real concern. Store it sealed, in a dry, cool location, and divide it into smaller portions rather than opening one large container repeatedly. Oxygen exposure is the primary quality threat over time. The value of this item is not just nutritional, it is behavioral. It is what makes someone continue eating when monotony is pushing them toward eating less. In a real extended disruption, that distinction determines outcomes. 4. Powdered soup. There is something that disappears in a crisis that calorie counts and nutritional charts cannot measure. The sense that things are still manageable. That daily life, while different, still has structure. That a meal is still a meal and not just a survival task. When that feeling is gone, the psychological impact on daily function is significant. Sleep quality decreases. Stress responses are more difficult to regulate. Physical performance drops not because of inadequate nutrition, but because the nervous system is operating in a sustained high-alert state. People eat less, sleep poorly, and begin making poorer decisions. A compounding cycle that is difficult to reverse once it starts. A bowl of hot soup prepared from powder and water does something that cannot be replicated by cold, plain food. It signals normalcy, warmth, familiar flavor, the ritual of preparing and consuming something that resembles a real meal. These have measurable effects on stress regulation and mood. You are not just eating. You are resetting your nervous system slightly, and that reset makes everything else more manageable. Powdered soup also typically combines multiple ingredients in a single package, creating a relatively balanced nutritional profile without requiring separate preparation steps. This is a significant advantage when energy and resources are limited. Store it sealed and dry, in small portions to protect against moisture absorption, which degrades both texture and flavor faster than most people expect. When the environment around you is difficult to control, what you can control matters more. A hot meal from powdered soup is one of the simplest, cheapest forms of psychological stabilization available. 3. Fruit powder. After several weeks of the same foods, something subtle changes. Not physically, but in how meals feel. There is a monotony that builds slowly, a loss of the small pleasures that normally make eating enjoyable, and eventually an increasing resistance to mealtime itself. Fruit powder addresses this in a way that no other item on this list can replicate. A small amount mixed into water, stirred into oats, or added to any neutral-tasting food introduces natural sweetness and a brightness of flavor that breaks the repetitive cycle. It does not take much. Enough to make the meal feel different, to give it a familiar character, to make it something the body welcomes rather than tolerates. That shift in reception has real consequences for how consistently a person eats. Beyond the behavioral function, fruit powder delivers vitamins, particularly vitamin C, that are absent from most shelf-stable emergency food supplies. Fresh fruit is one of the first things to disappear in any disruption, and the micronutrient deficiencies that result are not immediately visible but accumulate steadily over weeks. Fatigue increases. Immune function decreases. Recovery slows. All of this begins before there are obvious symptoms. Fruit powder is highly sensitive to moisture. Even small amounts of humidity cause it to absorb water and clump, losing both texture and potency. Store it sealed in a dry, cool, dark location and divide it into small portions to limit exposure. Under proper conditions, it lasts 20 to 30 years. Opened and poorly stored, that timeline collapses quickly. When everything tastes the same and meals feel like obligations rather than nourishment, fruit powder restores enough normalcy to keep a person eating willingly. That is its primary function, and it is not a small one. 2. Vegetable powder. Some forms of physical decline are dramatic and obvious. Others are quiet, gradual, and well underway before anyone notices. The absence of vegetables from an extended diet falls into the second category. In the first days, nothing seems wrong. Calories are present, protein is present, energy is maintained at an acceptable level. But the micronutrients that vegetables provide, vitamins, minerals, fiber, and the compounds that support cellular function and immune response, those begin running low immediately. And as they deplete, the body adjusts by running less efficiently. Digestion becomes slightly less effective, so nutrients from everything else you eat are absorbed at a lower rate. Immune response weakens gradually. Recovery after physical effort takes longer. Energy feels less stable despite adequate caloric intake. None of these changes feel like an emergency. They feel like getting slightly older each week, which means they are easy to dismiss until the accumulation becomes impossible to ignore. Vegetable powder is the most practical way to maintain micronutrient intake when fresh produce is unavailable. In dry form, it stores for over 20 years under proper conditions. A small amount mixed into soup, stirred into porridge, or added to any cooked dish delivers meaningful nutritional support without significantly changing the flavor or texture of the base food. Moisture is the critical storage variable. Vegetable powder absorbs humidity rapidly and degrades when it does. Mylar bags with oxygen absorbers, stored in a consistently cool and dark location, with the supply divided into small portions, protect quality across the full shelf life. Limit how often any single container is opened. The body does not announce micronutrient deficiency loudly. It whispers it, slowly, until the whisper becomes impossible to ignore. Vegetable powder is how you prevent that conversation from starting. 1. Corn powder and supplemental carbohydrate sources. When everything has been counted and considered, when every other item on this list has been evaluated for nutritional value and shelf life and storage requirements, what remains as the absolute foundation is the simplest thing: energy. Basic, consistent, accessible energy that the body can use to keep moving, keep thinking, and keep going through another day. Corn powder and other supplemental carbohydrate sources fill that role. They are not remarkable. They do not provide complete protein or essential fatty acids or immune-supporting micronutrients. What they provide is the baseline fuel without which nothing else functions. Movement requires it. Cognitive function requires it. Body temperature regulation requires it. Without sufficient carbohydrate energy, the body begins pulling from protein stores to meet basic energy demands, which accelerates the muscle breakdown that everything else on this list is designed to prevent. In dry form, corn powder stores for over 20 years under proper conditions. It is inexpensive, lightweight, and flexible in use. Added to soups, used as a thickening agent, incorporated into other cooked dishes to increase caloric density. No complex preparation, no equipment dependency. Just energy, available when it is needed. Storage follows the same principles that apply throughout this list. Moisture is the primary threat. A sealed, dry, cool, and dark environment extends shelf life to its maximum potential. Divide the supply into manageable portions and open only what is needed at one time. Small, consistent habits in storage protect years of preparation from being wasted by a single careless moment. Corn powder does not make difficult days easier. It does not make meals more enjoyable or nutritional profiles more complete. What it does is keep the system from stopping. And as long as the system is still running, everything else remains possible. Here is what this list actually represents. It is not 12 items on a shelf. It is 12 different ways the body can continue functioning when the environment around it stops cooperating. Some of these protect physical strength. Some protect digestive function. Some protect the psychological will to keep eating and keep moving. Some are the deep foundation that everything else sits on top of. Most people think preparation means storing large quantities of food. The reality is more specific than that. Preparation means understanding which needs will go unmet first when the supply chain breaks, and filling those gaps before they open. Protein before muscles start breaking down. Fat before the body loses its ability to maintain heat. Micronutrients before the immune system begins degrading silently. Flavor and variety before appetite fails and eating becomes something a person has to force themselves to do. You do not need everything today. You do not need a perfectly organized system built overnight. What you need is a direction and a first step. One item purchased and properly stored is more valuable than a full list that exists only as an intention. Each addition builds on the last, and the gap between prepared and unprepared closes faster than most people expect once the process begins. If this was useful to you, please like this video and share it with someone who needs to hear it. My channel will keep building this library of practical, actionable information so that more people have what they need before they need it. The next video covers 6 specific foods that become critical during extended power outages. Foods that most people have never considered storing. You do not want to miss it.